Welcome, viewers and listeners, to the Total Football Analysis EPL Podcast. We are the Thinking Fans Podcast. Each week, we get together with our besties, who are current pro players, real coaches, academics, and stat heads. We're sponsored by the EPL Prospectus, a 280-page guide of the upcoming season created by 25-plus writers and designers. Moneyball for football, analytics plus eye candy, available at www.thinkingfanmedia.com and on Amazon. Today, we're joined by soccer analyst Harshal Patel. Also on the pod is Dre Fortune, a professional attacking midfielder for North Carolina FC. I am host Chris Mumford. Bella ciao. During week 8, we had mostly normal outcomes. English clubs had an outstanding record in Europe last week, 6-1 with Man United as the odd man out. Goliaths Man City and Liverpool settled for a draw, while ManU, Tottenham and Chelsea took care of business. Arsenal struggled against a plucky Aston Villa. Leeds stumbled in a peculiar match. And we have Leicester on top of the table. Today we review Man City-Liverpool, Everton, Man United, Arsenal, Aston Villa, Chelsea, and Sheffield United, and other matches of note. Harshal, go ahead and get us started on the marquee match of the weekend, Man City versus Liverpool.
Yeah, this was City-Liverpool games have been perhaps the most interesting games and the most entertaining games between top two or sort of the big six teams that we have in the Premier League over the last 2-3 years, because they've both obviously been fighting towards the top of the table in that time. And in Pep Guardiola and Jurgen Klopp, you have two of probably the world's best managers on the touchline, and they always bring in some form of tactical change, or they try and nullify each other or try and get the better of one another. The two managers who always go for a win, and those games have always been entertaining, both in the Premier League and in the Champions League, where they've also met in this time. This Sunday's game was a bit of half and half, I think. The first half was really fast-paced, played at a really high tempo, chances at either end. And then you saw that drop significantly in the second half. But from a tactical point of view, what I found really interesting was that both sides were effectively playing a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-4. That sort of formation is something that's really died out over the last decade or so, as most teams have moved to a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1 to try and have three midfielders, and you then essentially just have the one striker. But Liverpool had a lot of midfield injuries and absences. So, and they also, the fact that Diogo Jota has started his Liverpool career in such great form meant that, Klopp almost had to pick him. So he played him on the right. Firmino was playing as a sort of number 10 behind Mohamed Salah. And for City, Gabriel Jesus returned, which meant that they moved to a 4-2-3-1, which they've played a lot this season, with Kevin De Bruyne playing as the number 10 and then Jesus as the striker. So what this did was it led to a very open game in the first half. Both teams were pressing high, which was essentially the 4-2-4 that I spoke of. But Liverpool did it intelligently, because Firmino and Salah were sort of blocking the pass into the center of the pitch, into the City midfielders. So there were a lot of times when City had the ball, but they couldn't get it through the center, and they were just playing it around the back line. So they succeeded in that sense. The one time they failed with the press, when Mane was pressing too high, it led to space on the right, was when City essentially scored, because there was space on the right. Wijnaldum was forced across to cover, which then created space in the center for De Bruyne to pick the pass to Jesus, and Jesus scored. So first half was great. Second half, I thought fatigue became a factor. We saw Trent Alexander-Arnold go off with a calf injury, and Jurgen Klopp was quite annoyed at the end with the fixture scheduling and the fact that they don't have 5 subs. And that's a big reason why the intensity dropped. And I think that we're going to see that with both teams this season, that they're not going to be at the level that they have been over the last, say, 18 months or so. And that's, in terms of the result, yes, both teams dropped 2 points, but they were still pretty good. But I think because that intensity level is going to be lower, it's not going to be a season where you need to get 85, 90 points or more to get the title. I think this is going to be a season where a much lesser points total will do it, because City and Liverpool will drop a lot more points because of the schedule, because of injuries, because of COVID and all of that. So in essence, yes, it was a good game, but long-term implications, I think, are that you're going to see a much closer title fight. And maybe a smaller team has a chance.
Ray, what's your take on the match?
Yeah, I think it was a game of two different halves. Honestly, I think the first half was a lot more entertaining and free flowing and open. I think the second half was a little bit tighter and a little bit slower. I don't use the word boring, but I think in comparison, you have one that was a little more exciting than the other. Obviously, in the end, they ended up tying the game. I thought the penalty was a fair one. I know we've had issues with that, throughout the course of the season and with VAR and whatnot. I thought the penalty for Liverpool was fair. I thought Man City scored a good goal. I think Jesus was a little bit fortunate with his touch, but it works out like that sometimes, and they end up scoring a good goal. I think some talking points out of the game, obviously, would be the penalty that was awarded to Man City. Everyone's complaining about where Gomez's hands are supposed to be as opposed to, is it a natural position? I think they were a little bit unlucky to have conceded that, but then De Bruyne goes up and misses it anyhow. So I think that's definitely one big talking point. And then, as Harshal mentioned, I think the subs are a big thing. Injuries may be a little more prominent with less subs and the way that the schedule is right now. So I know both Pep and Klopp spoke after the game in their interviews about potentially trying to sort that out and get that changed. So I'll be interested to see how that works out for them in the future.
Yeah, I think my take on it was I found the first half so incredibly delicious, right? I mean, just like, wow, I want to play soccer that way, right? Second half, you could just tell the gas seemed to be there was no wind in the sails. XGs ended up pretty comparable for both teams, 1.3, 1.4 for Liverpool and Man City. Even the possession, 55% Man City, you kind of expected. The truth is for all the brilliance, Man City only took 7 shots, of which there were 2 on target, and Liverpool took 10 shots, of which there were 3 on target. And you would hope that in the final third there would be more fireworks with these better teams, but the truth is that they seem to neutralize themselves. I was struck, though, that Man City, the attacking was 40% on the left and 43% in the center, while as that for Liverpool, it was 90% in the center. So I found that interesting. I will say that the goalkeepers, I think, didn't have a whole lot of work if you only had 5 shots on target. But to their credit, they came off their line awfully high, sometimes just on top of the box or just outside of the box, and were either able to clear or pass out to a teammate and really kind of avert some potential very dangerous goal scoring opportunities for the opponents. So I would probably look forward to going back and watching that first half again, just to watch really poetry. But the second half I could easily do without. And, I think 1-1 was probably a fair result. And, I think all of us were looking a little bit of drama between Pep and Klopp. But the thing they seem to be most animated about, they were agreeing upon. They have a mutual enemy, which is 3 substitutions versus 5 in a cluttered fixture list. So I don't know. I thought that was, I honestly, I left feeling a little unsatisfied with the 1-1 match. But I think that if that's what they do and they keep beating teams that are lessers, then they're probably going to end up in first and second, which wouldn't surprise me at all. Well, let's go ahead and change our attention, Harshal, to I want to take a quick detour to talk about Man United and the Besticas, because they were the odd man out with respect to Champions League. And then let's go ahead and circle into the Everton ManU match. Walk us through the ManU Besticas match, please.
Yeah, the Besiktas match was, again, with United, it's been, I said this last week as well, it's like one step forward, one step back. And coming off a 1-0 loss to Arsenal last week in the Premier League, you would have thought that the Besiktas game was ideally a good match for them to get back into sort of winning ways, right? Because Besiktas aren't really a formidable opponent. It's their first season in the Champions League ever. And it ended up being their first win of. I'm not sure I think it was the first time they've scored a goal in the Champions League, and they ended up winning the game as well with the 2 goals. So it was just that game in terms of tactics and organization and structure. Again, United started with a diamond in midfield, which they had done for the previous 2 or 3 games as well, but it didn't seem to work. Positioning was all over the place. United were again favoring the left hand side way too much, and there were passages of play, especially in the first half, where you'd have 6 or even at times 7 outfield players all towards that left sort of space, but it wasn't being capitalized on. I mean, when you have those many players on one side, you obviously have overloads. You're overloading the opposition in terms of numerical advantage, but there were no quick passing exchanges or no movement to take advantage of that and create space. And in the second half, Ole made a couple of changes. He put Matic in at centre half, brought, I believe it was McTominay who came on for... I can't remember who went off, but McTominay, I think it was Fred who went off. And even after that, it was pretty comfortable, I'd say, for Istanbul, because it's not like United mounted a serious surge or that there were too many saves that the goalkeeper had to make. Again, the structure was a little off. The United have been an unbalanced side. They don't have enough of an attacking threat down the right-hand side. And you've seen that so many times now that opposition teams are content to let that side sort of, stay relatively unguarded. And there were times when Wan-Bissaka was free, but he didn't have anybody in front of him. And the Istanbul were happy to let that situation play out, because they knew that even if Wan-Bissaka does get the ball, like say if Pogba or whoever, Fernandes, switches the ball out, Wan-Bissaka himself is not great at attacking, and he doesn't have a winger in front of him who can do damage. So that sort of lopsided attacking shape that United have had for the last, I'd say, 18 months or so, again, is an issue. And obviously, we've seen enough footage on social media of the first goal where everybody was up at that corner and Dembaba was able to run through on goal from his own half with nobody, not a single United player covering from a United corner. That was just, as people have pointed out, that was Sunday League stuff. You see better defending at schoolboy level, right? So that, I don't know who picks up the blame for that, whether it's the coaches or the players. And even the second goal, Maguire gets done by a dummy by Ba, and then that leaves the winger absolutely free and open in the box to take a shot. So basic mistakes, basic errors that happen in that game. So was not quite a great show.
So Dre, help us understand this here. You've got a Man United that has a poor showing on midweek, and then they show up on the weekend and have a really good outing. What have the experience has been like on teams you've played for in terms of having that level of inconsistency, and what's the player's mindset there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that always just comes down to mentality. I mean, they obviously they lost at home to Arsenal, and that'll be something that they're frustrated with and unhappy with. But then I think the Champions League game is nobody expected them to lose that. So after losing that game, I think you don't get into a panic, but it's very eye opening and alarming, and the bells start going off a little bit, and I think that just kind of gets them to refocus. And I think something that people say a lot in the game is get back to the basics, get back to the things that the simple things. So for example, something as basic as when you lose the ball, make sure that you get back into your shape first, and little things like that I think help you to progress. And I think that's kind of what they looked at in terms of the next game going forward, which is the game against Everton.
Well, and that Everton match was very interesting, I thought, in that, if you at first glance at the numbers, the XGs were pretty comparable, 0.84 for Everton and 0.94 for ManU. And, Everton dominated possession at 57%. They did better in duels overall at 53%. And there were 22 shots taken on goal, but there were 22 shots total, but there were only 6 on goal. Everton had 1 on target, and Man United had 5. So and frankly, De Gea did not have a single save that entire match. So that's a bit of a head scratcher in that Everton dominated possession, didn't have any shots on goal, and it seemed like Everton was hustling even more. And this reminded me of maybe Everton of last year or the year before versus kind of the new look 2020. Harshal, what's your take on it?
I think, and I mean, there is a stat doing the rounds on social media as well, where basically every game that Richarlison has missed since he joined Everton, I think a couple of seasons ago, they've not won. I don't know what the number is. I think it's 17 or 18 games or something like that. And Ancelotti actually, because he was asked so many times in the pre-match and in the build-up to this game, he literally said that, it's not really a stat that means anything, but we do need to improve on it and make sure we can win games without him. But I think the way this Everton team is set up and the profile of players that they have, Richarlison is really unique because he can play as a striker and a winger. And if you look at, say, for example, his XG numbers, he's averaged an expected goals per 90 number of 0.28, no matter where he's played, whether he's played on the right, whether he's played on the left, or whether he's played centrally in his Everton career, or it might just be in his Premier League career as well. I'm not sure whether that includes his tenure at Watford as well, but he's just extremely effective no matter where he plays on the pitch. But when he's been playing on the left with Calvert-Lewin as the striker, he's direct, he's pacey, he can dribble past players, and obviously he can set up goals for Calvert-Lewin, but score himself as well. And they've lost that. They don't have that cutting edge anymore because they've tried Alex Iwobi there. They've tried to play Andre Gomez in sort of like an inverted sort of attacking midfielder sort of position. Bernard was the one who played there this weekend, and he did score, but he's again not someone who has the same skill sets, and he's just very unique, Richarlison. So I think once he comes back and once they have that sort of first choice lineup back, that Everton, I'm not saying that they'll hit the same sort of form that they had at the start of the season, but they will be a more threatening outfit. But at the same time, there is obviously a concern then that if you're so reliant on maybe one or two players, that if they get injured or, it's suspended, as is the case with Richarlison, that your team is going to struggle, and that's what's happening with Everton.
So, Dre, what's your take on coaches that have played the game at a pretty high level versus coaches that haven't? Because Ole clearly did play at a very high level. And, what have your personal experiences been with those different types of coaches? And, I feel that we're obliged to talk about whether Ole should go or not. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think they'll have different perspectives. I mean, when you've played, you have a different understanding of the game to someone who hasn't played. But then at the same time, I think you're depending on when you played. So, for example, someone like Solskjaer, who stopped playing a little bit longer ago, versus someone like Arteta, who only recently stopped playing. I think the changes in the game, I think sometimes they may struggle to get a hold of. So I think that can affect their coaching style a little bit. And I think Solskjaer is just kind of, still trying to figure it out a bit. And I don't know. It's something that, you obviously you want to be able to give managers time and allow them to figure things out. You can't be too hasty to make decisions. But I mean, then again, if the club is Manchester United, I mean, I have the table up in front of me. It goes down to 12, and I don't see them on the list, and that's not something that the club stands for at all. So it's a little bit tough. I'd like to see him stay. I'd like to see him, maybe get another full season and then see how it plays out, and just kind of go from there. But it's tough. I understand the fans are a little bit anxious to see results and see positive changes. So I know they'll be probably calling for that.
Well, what I find interesting is if you look at the last three managers, Van Gaal had 52 wins, 24 draws, and 24 losses. Mourinho had 62 wins, 23 draws, and 15 losses. And Ole's had 56 wins, 20 draws, and 24 losses. So he's done a little better than Van Gaal and a little bit worse than Mourinho. So, I don't know if that's still Man United quality, but I just think it does make sense to keep things in perspective. I will tell you that the Poch interview obviously generated some heat on the interwebs. I really think he's quite a coach, and I think there's just growing tension on whether ManU's going to lose him to somebody else. Harsh, I'll give you the last word on this.
Yeah, it's as you said, the most fans, Man United fans do want to give Ole time, obviously because of his status as a club legend and all of that, and because there have been encouraging results throughout his tenure, mostly against the big teams. And his clear weakness is in sort of setting up a team to break down a low block or a team where, the teams that's sitting back. But as you said, the main concern is that when you have someone like Mauricio Pochettino who's available, potentially even someone like like Max Allegri, who's also available since he left the Juventus job. When you have a couple of top-class managers available, it's about weighing up whether, do you want to make the change right now and bring in someone who's proven, even though, in the case of Pochettino, it's not like he's proven in terms of winning trophies, but he clearly improved that Spurs side by leaps and bounds, individual players and the team during his time there. So it's a case of whether, as you said, do you risk it, stick with the guy you've put your sort of money on and you've backed, or do you then try and make another change and bring in someone who's a bit more proven? So it's the same, I think, dilemma within the fan base as well, whether people do want United to stick with Ole, but at the same time, there's this concern about if, say, United were to sack him 6 months down the line, sack Ole 6 months down the line, we may not have Pochettino available at that point. He might have gone somewhere else. So,
okay. Dre, walk us through the Arsenal-Aston Villa match. What was your take on that game?
That was very, very frustrating to watch for me. I'll start there. No, but honestly, I mean, all credit to Aston Villa. I think they went out and they did a job. They had a clear plan, and I think it worked. I mean, they scored 3 good goals. Arsenal just never really looked like they were really up for it. I mean, it was just, I don't know. They struggled in all aspects of the game. I mean, there's not really, I think, just from a clear effort perspective, I think Aston Villa beat them in that, and that just kind of led to everything else throughout the game. Jack Grealish was really good on the day. Ollie Watkins was really good. Ross Barkley was good. And I mean, I think from the opening whistle, I mean, Aston Villa scored within a minute of the kickoff. I mean, from kickoff, they went straight forward into the Arsenal half. Arsenal tries to clear it. They win the second ball. They put the ball down. They go forward, and they were on the front foot from the beginning. They weren't backing down from Arsenal as teams often do, and I think that just kind of set the tempo for the whole game.
Harshal, what's your take on the match?
Yeah, as Jay said, Arsenal were, quite disappointing in terms of how they approached the game. And what I found interesting was, obviously with no crowds, you can hear a lot more of what's being said on the touchline. And I'd say probably for the first 20 minutes or so, you could literally hear Arteta. I'm not exaggerating here. You could hear him tell each player where to pass the ball. It was literally him instructing every player when they were on the ball, where to pass or whom to pass to. And it was that level of instruction or micromanagement that he was doing. Now, whether that's because the players weren't sticking to the game plan he wanted them to stick to, or whether it was just a lack of confidence and him wanting to sort of make it a bit easier for them by telling them what to do rather than them having to think for themselves, I don't know. But I don't think that's a good sign when a coach has to, I can understand one player or 2 players, where you're telling them, okay, you need to do this or do that. But he was literally telling the entire team, every player where to pass. So I don't know. And we've had this sort of conversation around Arteta as well. It's similar to the one we've had around Solskjaer, where you wonder whether, he's up for it. He has shown a lot of promise. There is sort of evidence of a tactical plan and what he wants to do. But results like this then put all of that, under the microscope. And the stats don't make for good reading as well. If you look at expected goals, for example, Arsenal are 13th in the league for expected goals per 90. They're, I think, 16th in the league for shots per 90. Aubameyang has scored 2, I think, goals in the league all season, one of which is from open play, which was on the opening day against Fulham. The other goal he scored was from the penalty spot against Arsenal, against United last weekend. And there's a clear lack of creativity. And then you have a £350,000 player sitting on the bench, not even on the bench, in Mesut Ozil. So those questions are always going to be kept asking as long as he's at the club. But there are clear issues there. One of which is that there's no creativity in this side, and they're going to struggle to create chances. And obviously the defense didn't do well in this game either. So same sort of issues as United.
You know, what I was really struck by still is the Aubameyang question, right? I mean, 77% of attacks on Arsenal were on the left side. So he was busy doing something. But in terms of being able to put the ball in the back of the net is still an open question. I guess the other elements that I found interesting is that Arsenal had 56% possession, and more times than not, against better teams, they're happy to give up having a majority possession, but not this match. And the fact is that we could chalk this up to that goal getting scored, and the first goal getting scored in the 46th second, right? Where, as we all know, really changes the complexion of a match. But what I was really struck by is the duels. And I know this is a general statistic, but it's still worth mentioning. Arsenal won 38% of the duels, and Aston Villa won 59%. And in terms of loose ball, Aston Villa is winning a majority of those. And I think in terms of outright hustle, I think Aston Villa just really, they just seem to work a whole lot harder, and the stats seem to bear that out. I will tell you that third goal, all the goals were very appealing to watch. I mean, Aston Villa.
Not to interrupt, Chris, sorry, just a correction. Villa didn't score in the first minute. That goal was ruled out by VAR.
That's true. Good point.
Yeah, it was disallowed. Yeah.
Good point. Well, I still think
it was a brilliant goal. It was an absolutely brilliant goal. And the argument that Leno wouldn't have saved it, even if there was nobody in front of him. But I think it was Barkley who was offside.
That's exactly right. Yeah. The fact, and I think thanks for correcting that, still would make the argument that they were very much on the front foot. And particularly even the last goal, which was incidentally initiated by Martinez on a save and then rolling it out to the left side. It was they just seemed to be firing on all cylinders. And I don't know where Arsenal is right now. I want to believe in the Arteta story, right? I want to believe in the Aubameyang. He made the right decision and decided to stay someplace for another 5 years. But Dre, what do we do with Aubameyang? Where do we put him? How do we activate him?
I don't know. I mean, I've always thought that he would be better playing down the middle. For some reason, they choose not to operate that way. I mean, I think when you bring in Willian, you have more options out wide now. I mean, you've got him, you've got Pepe, you've got Saka who can play out wide. So I thought that they might entertain that a little bit more, but obviously Arteta's still going with Lacazette down the middle. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, without the creativity aspect that everyone's talking about, you don't really know how. I mean, he's not a guy that you're expecting to create chances for himself and stuff like that. He's someone you want on the end of your chances to finish. So without guys around him who are going to really create for him, I think it's tough to put much blame on him and they really expect much more because he's there to finish. That's his job. That's his role. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how they move forward.
Right. Well, it seems like Man United and Arsenal are struggling mightily with consistency. And I don't want to diminish Aston Villa because I really, they're fun to watch now, right? I mean, they've got some real talent in there. They've spent quite a bit of money. They've kind of gone under the radar, but they've spent, I think, over 100 million. Is that right, Harshal, about that? They're looking like they're playing that way at the very least. So we'll kind of see how Aston Villa goes. And we keep, I keep hesitating to answer the question, are they the real deal or not? But it seems like they're making a pretty strong case for that. Harshel, any quick notes on the Chelsea-Sheffield United match?
I mean, it was Sheffield United. They have struggled this season, so I wouldn't get too overjoyed by sort of Chelsea's result. But I mean, it still was a pretty good result. I thought the first goal that scored in the match obviously was Sheffield United. That was a really well worked set piece that Chelsea got caught out at, but then they sort of took control of the game, kept pushing, and the new signings and obviously Tammy Abraham, who's been there a while from the youth academies, sort of got the job done. And I thought from an individual player point of view, Ben Chilwell was really good. He scored again, and he sort of was that sort of, up and down presence that you need from left back. And Hakim Ziyech, who's had a late start because he was injured, he's come into the side and he's done superbly. I think he has now 3 assists in the last 2 Premier League games, and he did well in Champions League as well. And he, coming in from the right hand side, his left foot it's like a magic wand. He can put the ball where he wants in the box, and he did that twice. Arguably should have had another assist for a Werner chance, but you're seeing signs that these guys are now gelling together, that they're able to sort of play together, even though Chelsea do have some injury and other absences. Kai Havertz tested positive for COVID, so he's not going to be available. I think he might be back by the time the next round of games starts, but he certainly wasn't available here. Pulisic has picked up another hamstring injury, so he's out for a while. But then Ziyech, Mount, Werner on the left, and then Tammy Abraham up front. So that attacking piece looks like it's coming together. Defensively, I think there's still issues, but they as long as they're able to build a solid unit, Thiago Silva, Zuma, Chilwell, and probably for most games, I think it'll be Reece James. Aspilicueta might come in for certain games. That sort of unit, I think Chelsea are getting there. There is still, I think, a lot of work to do, but this was a good display.
Good. Dre, any thoughts on the Crystal Palace Leeds match?
Yeah, I mean, I personally was very surprised by that. I would have never guessed Palace would have won 4-1 and ran away with that. But no, I mean, I didn't catch the full game. I only saw bits and pieces of it as they scored a phenomenal free kick. I believe it was early, right? Yeah, that was a joy to watch. And I think, Crystal Palace, they've always been a team that, they're going to have some really good results. They're going to have some questionable results. And this one obviously was really good for them. And they're climbing up the table a little bit. I mean, they're in 8th place now. So I think they're going to be pretty happy with that and pretty comfortable. And then on the other hand, the things, Leeds is definitely going to need to sort some things out to move forward. But I'm sure they will. I mean, Bielsa's an incredible manager, so he's gonna sort out the little kinks there. But yeah, I was definitely surprised by the result.
Yeah, my general take on it was, I think Bielsa said they deserved to lose. But if I looked at the goals, they gave up a header that from about 6 or 7 yards out, really kind of almost a deflection off of the defender's head as well once it was going forward. So the Meslier did not really have any chance at it. That beautiful set piece, which is just like, as a keeper, you look at and you're just like, the only thing you can do is just say, nice shot. And then, the third was a deflection from basically a cross, deflected off of a defender and went in the near post by the keeper, which, he was clearly starting to look to jump in a cross, as any keeper should do. And that deflection was really unfortunate. Fourth goal in my mind was legit. Great play by Crystal Palace. So I think that's one of those ones you chalk up to some bad luck to that. I mean, Leeds was Leeds, right? I mean, they dominated possession. Their defensive intensity was amazing. But in terms of shots, it was the game you love to watch. 21 shots, 10 on target. So plenty of work for the goalkeepers there. So, we'll kind of see where Leeds goes forward, but they're going to be playing Arsenal coming back. So I'm not sure that Arteta is going to be too excited about playing them on your just as you're coming off the international break. So, well, good. Well, Harshal, why don't you kind of walk us through the table a little bit? What are some things that really stand out from your perspective?
Yeah, obviously, I mean, it's still early. We've played 8 games. City and United have played 7, and obviously the other 2 teams they were going to play have also played 7. So still early, but uh, you're seeing Leicester at the top of the table. Spurs are second. Southampton are doing well. Villa are doing well. Palace are level with Everton. I mean, everybody was talking about Everton's great start, and that's obviously leveled off. They've lost their last 3 games, but Palace and Everton are on 13 points, as are Wolves. So even West Ham are on 11 points. They're 2 points behind Wolves, a point behind City and Arsenal. So a lot of these teams, say the mid to lower table sides, have had a decent start. Some of them have had a better start than others, and there's no one common factor behind all of this. But I will still put it down to the absolute sort of crazy season we've had in terms of the scheduling and how quickly they've had to come back after last season ended. And that this season, we've spoken about it multiple times, this is going to be a freak season. It's going to be messy. So don't be surprised if towards the end of the season, or even say 2/3 of the season, even when we're say 2/3 of the way through, you could still see some of these clubs in that, in the higher reaches of the table, because the big teams could struggle. We are already seeing some of the big teams struggle, and on the flip side, some of these teams could do well, and that's, I think, something to keep an eye on as we go ahead.
So, Dre, Leicester's in first. Tottenham had a workmanlike win at 1-0 this weekend. Do you think these guys have staying power or not in terms of being able to fight legitimately for top 4 placing?
I mean, obviously, there's always a chance. You can't rule it out, especially when, I mean, we saw Leicester win the Premier League not too long ago. But I think it'll start to balance itself out a little bit and take a little bit more of a quote unquote normal shape as the season progresses. Obviously, right now the schedule's a bit hectic with European competitions and everything going on. And like Harshal, I mean, I think the quick turnaround was the biggest hit to all specifically the big teams, just because of all the competitions they participate in and whatnot. I don't know. I mean, Manchester City's 10th, Arsenal's 11th, ManU, I believe, is 14th or something like that. I mean, you'd imagine that they start to rise a little bit, and the results of Leicester City will kind of drop off a little bit. Southampton, Villa, those kind of teams. So I expect that it'll take a bit of a normal shape. I won't be surprised if it doesn't, just because of, I mean, it's a crazy season, crazy times. But yeah, I think within the next, I'd say maybe 15 to 20 fixtures, it'll start to look a bit more normal, what we expect.
Yeah, I took a look at Leicester's and Tottenham's, what their matches were so far. And granted, we're only 20% into the season, but they've played some pretty challenging teams. So it hasn't been due to a soft schedule. There's the real surprises for me are really, I didn't think Tottenham was really going to be able to show as well. And they have, and maybe it's because of too much of the all or nothing, thinking about that too much. Southampton, I just don't know what to make of it. But again, it's early season, but they've had 4 wins and 1 draw in the last 5 matches, so they're playing some really good football. Chelsea seems to be getting their act together. I think Mendy was an important missing piece, and I think their investments in their back line have really paid off in a big way. And I think now they're going to start focusing on scoring goals now that they have some trust in their defense. I don't know what to make of Everton. I don't know what to make of Leeds. And I certainly have no idea which day on Arsenal and ManUnited, which team is going to show up, because we know that they have opportunities for brilliance. And sometimes they look like a dullard. As far as Man City goes, I think having Che-SUFC back, having a legit striker, is going to lighten their load considerably. And we're hoping that Aguero is going to be coming back by the once we come back from the international break. So, Harshel, any other general observations on the league? Any things you're going to look for or surprises?
Couple of things. You mentioned City. There has been a distinct drop in a number of metrics from last season.
Mhm.
If you look at expected goals, for example, City, I believe, are quite low on that list. They're 10th or 11th on the list for expected goals so far this season. The likes of Villa, Southampton, Brighton, West Ham, Leeds, Chelsea, all of them have a higher XG total than City, which you don't really expect. I mean, City usually are, under Pep, have been among the top scorers in the league and some of the highest sort of chance creators in terms of volume. So that is concerning for Pep to look at, because obviously you don't have Aguero. I spoke about this last week as well. It's one thing to not have Aguero and Jesus to finish the chances, but you need to be creating the chances as well in the first place. And at the moment, City are definitely struggling to create chances, and it is looking a little bit like a one-man team where it's either De Bruyne creates a chance or there's no creativity, and that's not how City used to be. So that's a bit of a concern, and I'll be looking at how that evolves over the next few weeks with City. And then I'm going to be looking at the other teams. Southampton, as you said, they had a pretty difficult start, but they've recovered really well. But now they don't have Danny Ings till about mid to end December because he's had surgery on his knee. So Hasenhüttl started Theo Walcott with Che Adams as his two strikers. He is one of the few who's consistently played with two strikers. He plays a 4-2-2-2. So Theo Walcott plays as that striker. He did well. Che Adams scored and Stuart Armstrong scored. So it'll be interesting to see if Southampton can keep that run going without Ings. If Leicester can keep their run going. I've been really impressed with Brendan Rodgers, because he's shown that he's really flexible tactically. There have been games where he's sat back, defended, and countered, and he's won against City and Leeds like that. But then there are other games where Leicester have gone out and dominated possession and won as well. So he has shown a bit of tactical flexibility and an ability to get players playing in different roles and still be able to pull off the results. So again, that is one thing. And then lastly, Leeds. I will say that the game against Palace was a bit of an aberration. You don't expect Leeds to lose that heavily against a side like Palace, but that is the type of system or the type of team that they have struggled against this season. They've lost 4 games. If you discount the one against Liverpool, because obviously that was a madcap end-to-end game, the other 3 losses have been against Palace, Leicester, and Wolves, all 3 of which sat back, defended, and then counter-attacked. And that might, that if there are, and I'm sure other managers are taking note of this, and that might be the way to set up against Leeds. And don't be surprised if, next week, next week, I should say, Arteta decides to do the same thing against Leeds, that give them the ball. We'll sit back and soak up their pressure and the energy and the running and the sort of that they build up in our half, and then we'll counter-attack. So those are some of the things I'll look at.
Good. Dre, so what are you going to look forward to in the international break and really kind of the upcoming fixtures? What are things you're going to be paying attention to?
Actually, I looked at the schedule earlier. I think let me double check here 1 sec. I think the only game that I was really looking forward to was Netherlands play Spain, I believe. I think that one would be really good. Other than that, I mean, I don't know. I think they looked a little bit on the boring side, but I guess it's football. Anything can happen. So I'll definitely be watching and looking forward to some of those. And the other thing, I think a big thing right now, as far as the Premier League is concerned, is injuries and just getting players back to full fitness. And I think that'll go a long way, especially for some of the bigger teams. Obviously, Van Dijk's not going to be back immediately, but you look at Liverpool, they're missing him. Trent just got injured. They've had some injuries in midfield. I think that leads to some of their struggles. You look at Man City, they've just got Jesus back. They're still, waiting on Aguero. They've lost David Silva, so they're still transitioning from that aspect. I think I was just thinking about it. I think Chelsea is the only team that's really kind of found their their groove. I mean, they've had a few back-to-back routine wins, which I think they're gonna obviously look to keep going after the international break. Hopefully that doesn't break their stride a little bit. So I think a lot of the teams have some things that they're gonna look to improve on throughout the break, obviously, and come back firing on all cylinders. But
yeah,
anything happens.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. If we turn our attention just a bit to Champions League, for all the drama of Man United losing, they're still in first place in their group. They're tied for first place. All the other teams, the English teams in Champions League, are in first place in their group. And from a Europa perspective, they're in first place as well. So, I think that from a competition perspective, at least a European competition perspective, the English Premier League is doing just fine. So yeah, I think we've got a bit of a break here and regroup. I do find interesting, Harshal, you said earlier about the one-man team or such a heavy reliance on one player, but I don't know if that's just the domain of the English Premier League. If you look at Lukaku for Inter, you look at Ibra for AC Milan, and you look at Ronaldo for Juve, all those teams have struggled when those key players are not in the lineup. So it's, as a goalkeeper, I always complain why strikers get paid so much money, but you end up seeing why they do, because it's hard to stick the ball in the back of a net, particularly when you have competent goalkeepers throughout the league. So, that's going to be a really interesting theme. To kind of get back to where we started this season was the notion of Messi, just things being unsettled. And I will tell you, I feel that after these matches and the 8 games, that I still don't have really clear visibility on kind of how it's all going to play out. I still think Liverpool and Man City are the lodestars, or the where the gravity is. But that's carrying through. The other element, which is kind of dogma versus pragmatism, I do think that I'm seeing a lot more pragmatism from folks that I would expect to be fairly dogmatic, right? I mean, if you had told me that Liverpool was going to consider doing a 4-4-2, or just really, at most of the time, it seemed like 4 up top, and so and even seeing Bielsa in terms of some of the tactical switches that he's making. So maybe dogmatism is starting to disappear a little bit, or maybe pragmatism, or it's being balanced by pragmatism. But I guess we just got to keep up and keep watching the rest of this season. So, gentlemen, why don't we leave it there? We are sponsored by the EPL Prospectus, a 280-page season guide created by a team of 25-plus writers and designers. Moneyball for football, analytics plus opposition analysis plus eye candy. Available at www.thinkingfanmedia.com and on Amazon. Join us for our next Football Thinking Fans podcast. For now, bella ciao, ciao ciao.